Hello and welcome back to Geek Warning. I'm Dave Rome and I'm your host for this week. And this week, a small team of us. It's just myself and Ronan. Ronan, welcome back.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Welcome back. Yourself.
Ronan, you've been rather busy making podcasts. There seems to be a steady flow of podcasts that arguably designed, intended for members, but released for everyone. What have you published as of late?
Within the past, that was kind of why I welcomed you to the show also, because I kind of feel like listeners to the show will have last heard my voice. So felt right just to welcome you also.
I last heard your voice versus mine.
And what have I published? I started last week. We published Why Are Modern Bikes So Expensive with Rob Jatellas of Vector Bikes, delving into the actual cost of making bikes, according to Rob, I should say. He didn't let me look through his books, and the accountant didn't also. So, I mean, we kind of have to take his word on some of the numbers there, but it was enlightening all the same. And then you would have heard me on the Performance Process podcast last week, and we delved into the topic of progressive saddle positions. We've decided to call them with Nick from Wahoo. And then also you will have heard my voice along with two representatives from Zip, as I sat down with them last week to sort of just try and get some answers to some of the questions I had following some of the recent hookless discussions and debate that arose following two incidents for Lotto Destiny riders and across the last 3 or 4 weeks.
Yeah. I listened to all of those episodes, Ronan. Well done. I found them insightful, and also found it interesting that a lot of these things were bonus episodes, intended for members only. But I guess the Zip one was safety related, so we decided to not put that behind a members wall. And
the idea behind the Zip one, entirely safety. So there was never a question that was going to be published in its entirety for everybody to hear, for that safety reason. And the performance process was intended to be members only, as it usually is. But having worked, I think, 2 12-hour days in a row and into my 14th or 15th hour on Friday evening, when I realized that I hadn't actually asked our good editor, Will, to create a free version of that podcast, and it was already 8 or 9 p.m. on a Friday evening, there at that point was no option to make a members only version of that podcast.
Everyone won by accident.
Yes.
Okay. Great. Okay. All right. Well, I guess where I'm going with that is typically these sort of deep dives are kept for our members, at least in the full version. So if you haven't already, please consider signing up to Escape Collective. We are solely 100% member funded at this time, and your support allows this podcast to exist, it allows those podcasts to exist, and it gives you access to those podcasts when Ronan remembers to limit said access. So anyway, with that, I guess, this week's show, we've got a bit of a wrap up of new tech that's come. It's looking at the date, the 26th of March when we're recording this, and it was quite a busy day of new tech launches. So we've got a bunch of new tech and what we think of it, and something that's on Ronan's mind that I think is also on my mind now that he's mentioned it. So we'll cover that, and I guess let's get started, Ronan.
I also have a PSA.
Do you?
I do have a PSA.
Oh, that's great. Okay. We also have a PSA. So that's very professional. All right. I guess, at top of the news, there's yet another new cross-country race weapon. This time, Cannondale's Scalpel. The Scalpel, long-standing platform for cross-country. Once upon a time, it had a little rear shock just behind the seat tube. These days, it looks aesthetically a lot like everything else. But they've updated it, just as we've seen recently from other brands, updating their cross-country bikes. It's now 120 mil travel, front and rear. It's got 29 by 2.4 inch tires stock, like most of these bikes do. The geometry is more progressive, longer front center, slacker head angle, steeper seat tube angle. So it's like a It's got the devil's number of a head tube angle, 66.6 degrees at the front there. In Europe, they're offering bikes with Cannondale's Lefty, which is the one-sided fork that Cannondale has been quite famous for over 20 years. And in North America and other markets, they're probably more pushing a more traditional telescoping double-sided fork.
Why would that be?
Why are they pushing double-sided forks versus...
Yeah, why would the Lefty be restricted to Europe only?
I think the European market are more accepting of weird things.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think that's...
A lot of them do drive on the left-hand side of the road, so... Sorry,
yes.
Left-hand drive vehicles. They drive on the right-hand side of the road.
Vehicles. Oh, geez. Yeah, I think it's just the European market is a more traditional cross-country market and is therefore typically more accepting of stuff that is more focused around weight savings and perhaps being a little bit weirder in that sense, whereas the US market, being the home to Fox and RockShox, I think those brands are much stronger there and people tend to, go for more mainstream product, dare I say. I'm sure Cannondale maybe has other reasons as well, but I wouldn't imagine it being too far beyond that. But yeah, it looks like a good bike. It's sort of a lot of the models in Europe at least do have remote lockouts with a 2-position lockout, which is different from like what Specialized and Yeti have done with a 3-position lockout or a Scott. But yeah, otherwise this looks like a solid bike. No real word on weights yet, but hoping to get one in for review in the next coming few weeks. So, but yeah, it's yet again another option in the category that I think we're going to see a lot of new bikes come out in leading up to the Olympics, and they're all playing on that similar theme of around that 120mm travel, big tires, more progressive geometry. The geometries, give or take, all float around 1 degree within each other, and by looks of it, the reach numbers are within about 5 mil of each other as well. So everyone's sort of settling into the same sort of space at the moment. But Ronan, any thoughts on that?
I think it just looks like a kind of bike I would love to try, but given my area of expertise, I'm unlikely to ever get trying that anytime soon.
Yeah, fair enough.
And that's okay.
I guess it's probably worth highlighting that probably the biggest news here is that it's no longer all that weird. So Cannondale have actually ditched their AI offset rear wheels. They've gone to a standard bottom bracket. So yeah, it's all pretty normal now as far as what parts fit on it, which is awesome. And it's kind of a trend we've seen from Cannondale's latest bike releases is they are removing those barriers to purchase and just doing normal parts on these bikes. The other thing on here that's less appealing to me is the top end models have a system bar, which is a 1-piece handlebar and stem, and Cannondale is routing through the stem into the head tube. So yeah, through the stem, through the top bearing of the headset into the frame. Not all the bikes are doing this, just the ones with that with that system bar, but I don't like where that's going. So anyway,
we have a lengthy run sheet here. Perhaps we'll sidestep that rabbit hole this one time, will we?
Yeah, I feel like people know where we're coming from with that one. So speaking of hidden cables, let's talk about a bike that has none. Pinarello Bolide. What's going on here? There's some new track bikes.
Yes, Pinarello have they ahead of the Olympics, just as you were mentioning there about that Cannondale. Pinarello have also released a new bike. It's not a mountain bike; it's the track bike, the Pinarello Bolide F. Same bike that Ghana and Dan Bigham broke their record with. Ghana also broke the 4-kilometer individual pursuit record, didn't they? And the Italian men's team pursuit squad will be using that 3D printed Scalpel frame at the upcoming Olympics, and that's all been sort of made official. What was sort of released and what is new and announced today is a carbon version of that bike, pretty identical. This did appear on the UCI list quite a while ago, I think before Glasgow World Championships last August or something. But yeah, they've released that carbon version now. Say, from the outside, it appears to be the same bike, but it's obviously made from carbon. The women's team will use that, and Pinarello are saying something along the lines of the 3D printed version is stiffer or something for the men's squad. The carbon version is lighter to help the women's team get off the line quicker. Both are very fast, apparently. But what's interesting to me is that if I recall correctly, at the time that Bigham and Ganna's bikes were we first seen them and first got details about them, and that was, of course, when Ganna broke the record. I seem to remember Pinarello saying that it just was not possible to create that seat tube with the aero nodes, the tubercles inspired by humpback whales. That is sort of the defining feature, apart from the 3D printed part of it, the defining feature of aerodynamic feature of that bike. And now they have made it in carbon. So I think it would be interesting to hear from Pinarello how they've sort of developed that to be able to make it in carbon. Was it just a time thing with the original bike, or have they, because it is quite intricate also, so that would be interesting to hear more about.
Yeah, okay. I wonder whether it's just bubble wrap underneath the paint.
I mean, you don't really want to be setting UCI off to check these things, so let's not let's not speculate on that one.
UCI could put down the iPad to test for motors and just use a pin to see if they can pop, if they can pop the frame.
Yeah, but yeah, it's. I mean, the frames do look pretty. The 3D printed version is identical, I think, to what Ganna was already using, and now the carbon version looks pretty much identical to that.
Have they priced it high enough?
So that's the interesting thing. The carbon bike is €12,000, or around about €12,000 for the frame, which I mean is twice as much as you're going to pay for practically any normal time trial frame.
Yeah.
So, but it's still nowhere near the realms of exclusionary commercialization loopholes. The 3D printed version is £28,800 or something, which again, I don't know, like certainly when we heard about this bike 2 years ago, I was expecting some ridiculous price tag, like 50, 60, £100,000 for the frame. And compared to that, 28,000 doesn't seem all that ridiculous. It is utterly ridiculous. Yeah. But when you're going to pick a ridiculous number, how do you land on 28? Why not make it 88?
Yeah. No, I saw the pricing and thought like it almost seems like they're wanting to sell them. Whereas other brands have purposely priced theirs in a way that they're like they meet the UCR requirements of having a commercial good, but they've priced it in a way that it's like they're hoping no one buys it to then 3D scan it or whatever.
And having attended a Pinarello event at the Vuelta last year with Fausto Coppi presenting quite a lot of that event, I did get the sense at that time also that they wanted to take orders for that Bolide F HR, the track version of it. But I kind of also wonder, like, so you've got this weird thing going on where Dan Bigham had the record, and then his job was to help Filippo Ganna break that record, which was, it was his job. He did it very well, all that. He had the record, which is an amazing achievement in itself. And then, ultimately helped the new record holder to break that record. But now you've also got this weird situation where that frame that Bigham had assisted in developing for those hour record attempts is now also going to be the frame that the Italian Team Pursuit squad use in the Olympics. And it could very well be Dan Bigham lining up on the opposite side of the track and the British team having to, head off against Ganna and the other Italian squad on these frames that he helped to produce. And Bigham himself could be on one. He could be on a Hope. I don't know what he's going to ride for the Olympics, but
sure.
It's just another chapter in that sort of weird story that's happening there, unfolding there.
Yeah. Oh, well, anyway, it looks like a pretty cool bike. Yeah, as you say, it's got some pretty unique tech to it, and it is a bike we've seen before, but anyway, no doubt, look out for Italy racing on it.
I just keep thinking back to that final 2 laps of the Team Pursuit in Tokyo 3 years ago now. That was some of the best action you're likely to see at an Olympics, I think. Some of the most exciting. Well, the most exciting 18 seconds or whatever it was. Yeah.
You mentioned Scalmello. How do you say that?
Isn't it?
Yeah,
I've just resorted to saying it really, really quickly and hoping that people.
I mean, it's
Scamally.
It's an L away from being scam oil, alloy. But yeah, it's anyway. On that note, also using that material is Scope. They just released their Artech wheels, so it's going to be a growing range of premium wheels, and currently it's more on the road end, but they have plans to release wheels for time trials and triathlon and gravel even in this category. But premium pricing, carbon spoked wheels, differing depth rims. But the main thing here and the star pitch here is that, Scalmello 3D printed hubs. They look light. They are light. I mean, complete wheel sets start from just 965 grams. A 45 millimeter depth wheel set is just 1,120 grams claimed. Decent, modern internal widths of about 23 mil, and hooks. Ronan, what do you think of a 3D printed hub?
I think it sounds like a 3D printed warranty generator. Can we include that, or should I say something else?
No, you can okay. You can say that. Why do you think that, Ronan?
I'm not an engineer. I don't have a 3D printer. I have no expertise in this area whatsoever. Mm-hmm. I look at this and I just think this is a very brave adoption of this technology, and bringing it into a sort of presumably a mass-produced and definitely a consumer-facing product. Seems like we're very early in the life cycle of this technology to be moving in that direction. Yeah,
I guess from your point, so it's like in a hub, the forces coming from the spoke flanges or the spoke holes in this case, because they're straight pull spokes. But I guess that's a lot of point load and a lot of tension in one area, and basically, the 3D print technology is up to it, but you have to be incredibly confident in the consistency of the print, and and if there is any sort of faults in that print, then I guess with time that hub is going to crack. I guess in Scope's defense, it perhaps it may lead to a warranty, but it won't necessarily lead to imminent death.
Something like a broken spoke or something, isn't it?
Yeah, it'll just basically
like a broken spoke,
like a out of true wheel. But yeah, I think I'd hope and I expect that they've done some significant research and testing on these. But yeah, I mean, time will tell, I guess. For me, the bigger one would be the bearing surfaces and how consistent they can keep those. So in order to do it properly, they're going to have to, and I'm sure they are, but they have to post-machine the hub out of print in order to give a good enough bearing surface for correct bearing fit and not adding too much preload to the bearing. So that'll be an interesting one to see how consistent they can be on that. But it certainly looks pretty weird. It kind of looks like an item from the, it looks like I don't know, roots almost. It's got like a very organic shape to the hub. So yeah, it's kind of neat, but yeah, I'm curious to see how these ride and how they hold up over time.
The other two things for me that really stood out about these wheel sets were, first of all, the fish scales on the rim.
Yeah.
Which I just not something I've seen done before, and I'm struggling to see how that would improve flow, how that would be more aerodynamic. Looks to me like a bit of a drag inducer, so to speak, where you would want to induce drag, and then that sort of helps downstream. But yeah, I would love to get these wheels for a bit of aero testing.
So they do. They have had them in the wind tunnel, and from their own testing using tour magazines, weighted averages, they are of course the fastest. They're almost the only they're basically within rounding errors of DT Swiss, which is a rim design and rim shape done with contractual with a contract with Swiss side. And then I guess the next one that they've got on the list is Roval's Rapide wheel, which again is another one that you commonly see up toward the pointier end of aero testing. But yeah, certainly no independent testing that I've seen yet. And but yeah, weight wise, these are very impressive.
The weight was the other thing I wanted to mention.
Yeah.
Scary this, so like 1140 grams for a 45 mil.
1120 claimed. Yeah.
1120, which is just all sorts of crazy light, isn't it, for that depth of a rim on a disc brake wheel set.
Hooked carbon wheel with a pretty
Hooked
wide
carbon,
rim. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I think our concerns aside for the 3D printed hubs, I think these are actually a pretty interesting wheel. Obviously they're priced as such as well, so definitely up at the premium end of things.
The one other thing that jumped out to me from the press release was the I think it was referred to as the unique geometry of the rim, which ensures easy mounting of tubeless tires.
Mm-hmm.
Those sorts of terms have over the last couple of weeks, as I spend more and more time in the ISO standards. I'm not saying they're perfect, but there really isn't much space for unique geometries in that area.
The way I read that is they've reduced the diameter of the center channel, or have shaped the center channel in a way that makes it easier for the tire to stay in the center channel while you install it. And then, as you know, the center channel doesn't really play a huge factor in tire retention once there's air in it.
Once there's air in it being the key point.
Yeah. But yeah, that's kind of how I read that. But anyway, I guess we'll see. But as you said, Ronan, it's a wheel that does definitely have some different things going on about it, and I'd be keen to get your opinion on it if Scope's listening.
And I mean, like, it's not the first time we've seen Scope do something really innovative. They've had that Atmos hub tire inflator system at Pirate Bay for the past 2 seasons already, I think. Mm-hmm. So it's not like this is some brand new brand on the market looking to make a splash with a crazy wheel set. They do have a bit of history behind them also, and
for sure
there's just a lot to unpack from that press release, because there's a lot going on. We didn't even mention the spokes and all the things there. So
for sure,
interesting wheel set for sure.
Oh well, just another use of 3D printing that we're seeing widespread use come to the market. So I think that's the first hub on the top of my mind that I've seen. Is it the first hub you're aware of?
This is really your area of expertise. It's the first hub that I'm aware of, but I'll divert to you on this one.
Yeah. Okay. I could be forgetting one. All right. Let's move away from 3D printing things. I want to talk about tools, Ronan. There's tools. There's new tools.
I've seen that you had a comparison price in there, but I beyond that, I don't know what you're talking about here. You haven't given us a brand or a model name to
I haven't.
Up, so I'm as interested as
I'm very
right
vague
now.
On this, actually. The show notes simply say First Cycling branded Pliers wrench. And so the Pliers wrench is something created by Knipex out of Germany. They're a pliers specialist. And basically it's a parallel jaw, smooth jaw plier that, it works like a spanner, basically. So you can clamp things in a parallel sense, and you can almost replace an entire set of spanners with one of these. And unlike normally using pliers, these have a smooth jaw, and the parallel clamping means that there's no real damage ever done to whatever you're holding on to. So they're incredibly popular. They're initially a plumbing tool, but they're now incredibly popular amongst many industries. And in cycling, they first found popularity with like traveling mountain bike mechanics doing suspension work. But these days, they've been a very popular pick in bike shops, and certainly for years I've been recommending them. They've made many of my favorite tool lists or favorite product lists, and I'm a big fan of them. And it seems Feedback Sports has been listening because they now have one too. The patent from Knipex expired a couple of years ago, which has seen a flurry of tool brands offering this style of tool, and Feedback Sports is the first to offer that one that, not perhaps coincidentally, I don't know, is dimensionally the same as the exact length of Knipex plier that I have always recommended. Theirs is US $55. By comparison, the Knipex, the original, is $76 at full retail and often can be found at a discount. So personally, I'm still going to suggest people look for the Knipex. I've got my hands on the Feedback Sports. It works just fine, but the quality just isn't quite to the Knipex level. There's elements of it that remind you that it is a slightly cheaper tool. But yeah, more choice is rarely a bad thing, and it's cool to see this kind of tech hit the cycling market. So, do you have one? Do you have a Pliers wrench?
No, Dave. Unfortunately, I don't have one of those. My list of genuine tools is growing at an alarming rate. It's scary what you can do to a man's wallet. But as of yet, don't have this one.
Okay. One to add. I do have quite a few. So I'm a big enough fan of the Pliers wrench, and I've been using them for enough years that they accumulate. So there's various sizes of these, so you can get them in different lengths, and then as they grow in length, the width of the opening capacity changes, so you can clamp onto bigger and bigger things. So
you'd mentioned there that you had a list, a length that you recommended. Do you want to tell us?
Oh yeah, the 180 millimeter model. So I think it's 7 inches, and that's my go-to for general bicycle stuff. Sometimes the bigger ones are useful for very specific things, but for general bicycle stuff, if you can only have one, that's the one to get, and that's the length that Feedback Sports have also released. It's a very handy tool for all sorts of things. You can use it for even installing frame pivot bearings. You can use it as a plier for grabbing cables and tensioning cables, like as a third hand tool. You can also just use it as a replacement for a set of spanners for gripping all sorts of things. You can also, if you don't have a bench vise, it's also pretty handy for holding parts that you would typically clamp in a bench vise. So I'm a big fan. Happy to see a cycling brand offer it. But there you go. All right, Ronan, let's talk about what's on your mind and perhaps over the heads of your family. You just did a podcast with Nick from Wahoo about, I guess, in line with a new saddle that's been released that you've reviewed, but also bigger picture about how that saddle plays into more modern geometry concepts and modern bike fits. So what's on your mind? You're thinking forward positions?
I'm thinking actually something that we briefly touched on a couple of weeks ago. There was a new, I think it was a new Astra was announced with a 0.5 degree increase in seat tube angle. And really this new progressive saddle position, as Nick described it on the Performance Process podcast last week, it sort of involves, to overly simplify it, you really need to listen to the podcast, but to overly simplify it, moving the saddle forward and having the nose at least level and potentially nose down, with a whole host of claimed benefits that I have to say I have experienced myself, and this has become my new sort of position. A whole host of claimed benefits. I mean, the main ones being that you can then easier forward rotate your pelvis, open up your hip angle, more biomechanically efficiently use your center of mass to help produce power. It's not, before we get commenters, it's not using gravity to create some magical extra power or something. It's just being more efficient with you're using your center of mass. But the problem you run into in setting up this position with most frames these days is that you rapidly decrease the reach to your handlebars, and you end up having to go to longer and longer stems if you want to maintain the same reach, which you may or may not want to do. But certainly for me, the issue I'm running into trying to set up this position on other frames is that I just don't have the reach anymore. And then, you're obviously into the scenario we've discussed countless times about how big a job it is to change stem length on a modern bike with internally routed hoses.
And the impact that plays on handling of the bike probably as well.
And that's the big point I want to get to, is that all bikes are designed around a set sort of stem length.
Yeah.
And moving up a size or down a size might not have all that much effect. But if you're moving up 2 centimeters or 3 centimeters, you're going to be upsetting the characteristics of that bike.
Yeah.
And what was on my mind this week was what if as we've already seen Factor do and a couple of other brands do, moving to steeper seat tube angles and inline seat posts, and even Specialized have a positive 5 degree set forward, I guess it's not set back, but a set forward seat post for Remco Evenepoel. What might future road geometries look like if frame manufacturers catch up with what the riders are doing with their bike fits and sort of increase the front end reach of race bikes?
Yeah. So I've got some thoughts on this. I mean, first, like, just to go back a little bit, but like the change in stem length, there's two things going on there that change the handling of the bike. The one is like the tiller effect of the stems. It's kind of like the old comparison of the bus wheel, that you've got, a big wheel slows the turning versus a small steering wheel. Short stem would quicken the steering. A long stem would slow the steering as far as your input at the bar. But the other thing is just weight distribution over the wheels. So you go from being, intentionally on the bike, say, that comes stock with a 100mm stem, you go from having your weight fairly evenly distributed between the two wheels, and you move to a forward seating position and you increase the stem length by 2-3 centimeters, and all of a sudden you're way over the front wheel.
You're
the rear
in front
wheel
of your bike.
Yeah, the rear wheel doesn't have as much weight as intended, again, it slows that steering and just can just cause some quirky attributes. So
good for a photo finish.
But yeah, it's I think there's some things there that Ronan's got a very good point on, which is if people are pushing way forward on a bike that wasn't intended to be, then the handling and the geometry of it is not going to be ideally suited. But basically what we're talking about here, Ronan, I'm just going to say mountain bikes have been here for at least 5 years, maybe more.
Yeah, that's why I'm hesitant to use the term progressive, because
But in terms of the forward seating position, if you watch top World Cup races 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, they were all right over the bottom bracket.
The more I had forward. This described to me and the more pictures I've seen, the more I thought that looks like a mountain bike position.
Yep. So I'm feeling I'm the one that's been running like a mountain bike saddle and a mountain bike position on my road bike for like at least 5 years. So I'm feeling pretty smug on this one. But it's I would say and geometry in mountain bikes definitely caught up to that. So as seat tube angles got longer, they increased the frame reaches to not squish you into the bike.
So that's why I wanted to bring this up here, because I thought you might be able to answer these questions for me. Is like when I started playing around with bikegeocalc.com and sort of building some of what I thought could be progressive geometries, the first thing you're doing there is increasing the seat tube angle. So let's say I go 74.5 degrees. You might even want to go steeper if we worked off some of the effective seat tube angles that Nick suggested that riders are riding with now, 75, 76 degrees.
That was in time trial, wasn't it?
That was, I think what he was referring to there was if you actually take the place where you're sitting on the saddle and use that.
Effective seat tube. Seat tube angle is what I think he called it. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, if you increase the seat tube angle, you want to, if you also want to either maintain or increase the reach, okay, that's easy enough done. But the knock-on side effects, do you change head tube angle? You're obviously going to have to increase the front center. What effect does that have? What about trail? Do you want to, like the trail target that I have for a more traditional geometry am I going to have the same trail target or same trail preferences?
Yeah.
going forward with it. Yeah. If I'm more forward over the bike,
less trail. And that's the thing. Geometry, nothing happens in isolation. You change one thing, it's going to have an impact on another. So certainly no small topic. And I guess, but you look to mountain bikes and they have adapted to those more forward seating positions and getting more over the front end, and a lot of that was done in order to counter the negatives of the slackening head angles. And the technology shift in mountain bike that allowed those steep seat tube angles to be used was actually dropper posts, because if you move the saddle forward and it's still really high and up in between your legs and you go down a steep descent, it automatically becomes quite awkward and limiting of how to maneuver the bike. Whereas with the dropper post, you can get the saddle out of the equation, and that allowed them to basically put the saddle wherever they wanted. Less of an issue when you're talking road geometry. I guess the limitation in road geometry is the UCI's saddle behind the bottom bracket rule, which is 50 mil.
Yeah.
The nose of the saddle has to be 50 mil behind the bottom bracket. And I think the technology shift there is short nose saddles that's allowing this.
Well, yeah, and that's like the Wove Mag saddle that I reviewed. First of all, James had mentioned that although it's a road and gravel saddle, he wouldn't recommend it for any gravel that was too technical, because if you want to hang your weight over the back, it has got a bare carbon tail on it, which, might not be ideal to whack up against on a rocky descent or something. But the other thing was that saddle, the reason that carbon tail is there is specifically to sort of keep the saddle, which is much shorter than the actual useful part of the saddle, is much shorter than 24 centimeters, which is the minimum length for a UCI saddle.
Gotcha. Okay.
And that carbon tail is purely there to tick the box of being UCI legal and being 24 centimeters long. It's short nose with the nose cut even shorter, effectively, and a tail added on the end to keep it legal, which means you can get right up to 5 centimeters behind the bottom bracket. And like Nick doesn't really use 80 millimeter tool with the saddle, or doesn't recommend the use of it. But if we want to use it for a second, that 80 millimeter point would be even closer to the bottom bracket, because you can't really compare the nose if they're different lengths, nose and all sorts.
Can you explain the 80 millimeter tool that I'm currently wearing as a moustache?
It is a very good handlebar moustache.
Thank you. Here's one I prepared earlier.
It's the 80 millimeter tool gets its name from the 80 millimeter wide section of the saddle, which has become sort of commonly adopted as a measuring point for setting up bike saddles. I mean,
so it's just kind of a rectangular tool, and I guess
with it's a rectangle with one side open,
one length open, and it's basically set at 80 mil width, and you slide it onto the saddle, and it automatically locates at where the saddle hits its 80 mil width point, and that is where you use that's where you take all your measurements from.
I find it useful for just being, and you can pick any width of a point if you're using the same saddle, but just as a fixed position to measure to when you're using the same saddle across bikes. If you're using different saddles, it's a good starting point for setting up a new saddle that you haven't set up before in the same position as you use. There's no guarantee you're going to be using the same position with a different saddle, but it's a easier starting point than a wild guess.
So anyway, I think your podcast is really interesting, and I was sort of nodding my head to your performance process podcast recently was very interesting on this topic, and I was certainly nodding my head to a lot of the things you're talking about, and it kind of looked at my road bike. I'm like, oh yeah, that checks out. I think anyone that hasn't listened to it, it's worth listening to, and I also think, bigger picture, it's worth paying attention to modern geometry. And as Ronan says, steeper seat tube angle by itself in isolation, it's not necessarily a good thing if nothing else changes. The idea is that if they're going to steepen the seat tube angle, we really should see frame reaches increase to be in line with that.
I do think it'll take frame manufacturers a while to make that change, because you and I are talking about this now, and we had a conversation on a podcast about it, and I mean the conversation has been flowing off the back of that in the members only Discord. Yep. But for a frame manufacturer to go out on a limb and completely revise their geometry based on what has currently nothing more than a trend. If it is even that, is a big ask. So I think an increased seat tube angle is an inline seat post is probably as much as we're going to see for another year or two at least, I think.
Yeah. Potentially an unpopular opinion. I think for a long time, road bike reaches have been too long. So I'm actually perfectly fine with the trend of them steepening seat tube angles while not increasing frame reach. I'm more comfortable than ever. So, but yeah, I think I know those with actual flexibility and core strength might disagree with me. So each to their own. I guess your results may vary.
Well, I mean, what I want to see is standover height and bottom bracket drops changed, but we'll save that discussion for another day, perhaps.
Ronan, I think it's time for a PSA.
It is from me for a change.
Yeah, what is it?
So I'm gonna tell you my PSA, and if this is like commonly known, I was gonna say don't spoil it for me, but it's probably better I do know. But a multi-tool, we all carry multi-tools, or most of us carry multi-tools on the bike. Have you ever had said multi-tool rattle itself loose and fall apart?
I have.
Have you ever tried adding a magnet to the multi-tool, which will prevent it from rattling itself loose?
I have not. Explain.
So I had this issue.
I have. Sorry, just to cut you off there. I mean, I have used thread locker on said.
Yeah, I'm sure that
bolts,
could be done also.
But anyway, tell me your magical hack.
You don't tend to stumble upon adding thread locker to your multi-tool retaining screws or whatever. Whereas you may be the kind of person who stores a magnet inside their time trial helmet and a magnet inside their skin suit to maintain that helmet's contact with your back and the skin suit for aerodynamic purposes and time trial purposes. I
thought you were going somewhere like to ground your natural electricity.
No, I just mean just for aerodynamic benefits. But at the end of the time trialing season, you may have taken that magnet, the one that he's holding up here, which kind of like, again, rectangular shaped. What is that, about 6 centimeters long or something? And you may have just like chucked that in your bag and it attached to your multi-tool, and for months you didn't remove it, and then you one day realized my multi-tool hasn't shaked itself loose recently. So then you test it without the multi-tool, without the magnet for a single day, and suddenly it starts working its way loose, and you go, the magnet was keeping it together all this time. That's my PSA. If you're not the kind of person who has thread locker about you, you could just add a little magnet to your multi-tool and stop it from shaking loose.
Where are you putting the magnet?
I mean, just like, I don't have a multi-tool to hand here, but if you imagine one that like opens up out one way and out the other way.
Swiss Army knife style.
Yes, literally just like setting this on top of it. The added benefit is that I can now carry a screwdriver bit. Like
on top of the bolts or on top of the...
No, just on top of the hex keys or whatever within whatever your multi-tool tools are, just literally just like sitting on it.
Right.
You're not impressed.
I'm just questioning if that works, then would a rubber band also work, Ronan?
Probably would, but would you? I mean, you wouldn't stumble on that either, would you?
But then you wouldn't have a spare magnet to retain your contact between your time
this is what I wanted to get to,
suit.
is that for years, one of the issues I've had with multi-tools is that they do not contain a screwdriver head sort of pointed enough to get into the float adjustment screws on a speed plate cleat.
Yep.
And so you have to carry some other screwdriver if you want to adjust your float on the go, which I tend to do on a daily basis.
This is just the tool world telling you to run a more functional pedal system.
But with this, you can take a sharper pointed screwdriver bit, attach that to the magnet, which then attaches to the multi-tool, and you're not concerned about said screwdriver stabbing you in the event of a crash or something.
Right.
So it holds it safely inside the multi-tool.
Okay. All right. I don't know if
maybe this isn't a PSA. Maybe this is just
I don't know if this fit the PSA brief, but it's interesting nonetheless. So Yeah. Anyway, I don't have a PSA, an actual PSA to add to that, so we'll just call it
rubber bands break. Tape is just too annoying.
Yeah.
Not everybody has thread locker,
Yeah.
but chances are you have a magnet lying somewhere, and if you chuck that magnet onto your multi-tool.
I mean, you could also zip tie your multi-tool together and then carry a pair of cutters in your back pocket, because that's safe. You know, that's
folks. If you can't see Dave's face here, he's being sarcastic. I think.
Anyway, I don't hate this. I'm intrigued enough that I think I might try it. But I'm also looking at the multi-tools I use, and none of them are that style. So,
okay.
Yeah.
What style do you use?
I more use like the bit style of multi-tool. So it's more like closer to like feeling and working like a regular hex key with the access of a regular hex key, and then fiddly interchangeable bits that you can drop into grass and then spend. Yeah. So yeah, they're not perfect either, but yeah, for me they just feel closer to a normal tool, and I never have interference issues of getting them into C posts and stuff like that. So
maybe we could morph this into a pick one. Do you have a pick one for a multi-tool?
Oh, right. Okay.
Maybe we could resurrect this section here.
Oh, we're going to save the day. My pick one for a multi-tool. Okay, if I'm carrying a chain breaker, it's probably now the Day Saver out of Switzerland, which is kind of this really, like, it looks like a little L-shaped IKEA tool, but it's got double-sided flippable bits in it. Very, very light, very compact, and they also offer a chain breaker / tie lever that it all snaps together and is a crazily lightweight and minimalist tool that actually works surprisingly well. That's probably the one I'm picking. If I don't need a chain breaker, I have an old tool that's now discontinued from Spur Cycle has a titanium bit holder that was made by Paragon Machine Works, who do a lot of custom frame components. So a lot of high-end custom frames would use components from Paragon. That thing is rather sweet and is light, compact, and works amazingly well. But I don't believe it's being manufactured anymore. So that's a shame.
That is a shame. I'm just sort of... You lost me when you said if you don't need a chain breaker, because, I mean, you never need a chain breaker until you need one.
Yeah.
And then also you're carrying a separate chain breaker, which... The biggest concern I have with my multi-tool is that it doesn't have a chain breaker, but I've just sort of I've told myself I'll not be needing one. Yeah,
I'm kind of the opinion that off-road chain breakers should be carried because sticks and rocks, do hurt your bones.
Sticks and stones may break my chains.
Yes. And on-road, I can't remember the last time I personally experienced or even witnessed a broken chain on a well looked after bike.
This is I'm not comfortable with this conversation.
Sorry, touch wood.
Touch wood.
Yeah, so certainly chains break, but often it's user error in misuse of quick links, or perhaps it's a bad link that had been skipping for a while and was ignored. Yeah, I can't really recall the last time I actually saw like a proper snap road chain, because the new like 11 and 12 speed stuff's pretty strong, pretty reliable.
I think the last time I personally broke a chain, I could be forgetting one, but I think I'm accurate in saying it was on my first trip to Belgium as a junior in 2005, and yeah, didn't have many tools or anything. It was running Ultegra 10 speed.
Yep.
And it was like evening time or something. I think it was like after a post-tour crit, so bike shops were closed. Having tried to get home using half pedaling, I cable tied the chain ends together and then tried to half pedal my way home, which did not work.
Nope.
Yeah, I just had to wait and get a lift home. So since then, I've always been like, probably should have multi-tool with a chain breaker, but while I have had them on a few occasions, yeah, I don't currently. Yeah.
For me, it's just Murphy's Law. If you carry it, you probably never need it. So on that topic, and just to keep talking for the sake of to keep talking,
that's what podcasts are all about.
Yep. I really don't understand the fascination of people carrying Masterlink pliers on rides. Like, there are so many emergency Masterlink plier tools now on the market, and there's multi-tools that now include literally useless versions of them that are too small to actually do anything. I don't understand why you would need that. I've heard arguments that sometimes you might drop a chain and the chain is stuck in the bottom bracket and you can access the master link and then you can break your chain through the master link in an emergency and get your chain out. But you're assuming that you
your
can
chain still stuck, no?
Well, kind of. I mean, you can pull it out more easily if it's no longer connected, but you're assuming that you can actually access the master link at that point, which is far from a guarantee. You're more likely going to have to just, if you're going that path, you might have better luck removing your crank, or
I was just about to say that, yeah.
Or just breaking the chain with a chain breaker. And you don't need said tool to join a master link, so it's not like in an emergency you use your chain breaker, you install a master link. You're not using that tool to close the master link. So I just don't understand why people are putting master link pliers into their emergency kits to ride with. Reach out to me. Someone, drop me a DM or something if you think I'm wrong on this. But dare I say, I probably think about tools more than you do. And
reach out to us if you think about tools more than Dave does.
And think I'm wrong. Yeah. So anyway, that's chain breaker, yes. Master link plier for riding, no.
I can't really offer a pick one, but the one that I've always wanted to try, it sort of revolves around my love for and my fascination with building the perfect winter bike, which would have you dry and wet conditions and would be bulletproof and would last through winter and all that and would be nice to ride, blah, blah, blah. But would also carry all the tools out of sight that you would need to get yourself home. And as such, the one I've always wanted or imagined would be in such a build would be the wolf tooth in case that goes into the bar ends.
The bar ends, yep. And then unravels your bar tape when you pull it out.
Yeah, well, I was fully expecting you to point out some flaw that I wasn't aware of. I haven't actually tried one of these things yet. So this is more like advise me if that's a route that I should go down or not.
That tool has some very clever features with it.
Hides inside the bar end for those who
it certainly has some clever features, and as far as stashable tools inside of bar ends go, it's one of the better ones at not rattling and not causing other issues, and it's low profile enough to use on a mountain bike handlebar without really increasing the unwanted width of your handlebars. So yeah, overall, that's one of the better ones, but risking fraying your bar tape to pull it out is something I'm not a huge fan of, and you can get around that.
Just wrap your bar tape in reverse.
Wrap your bar tape in reverse, or wrap your bar tape so more like Di2 junction box style. So you're not actually putting the bar tape into the end of the bar. You're starting it on there on the edge of the bar. Is the other option. But yeah, it's an option, that tool. Not top of my list though.
All right. Well, that was an unexpected detour there for the podcast.
Yeah. Sorry. James would have never have allowed that to happen. James would have kept us on track and kept people listening as a result of it.
Do not lose faith. James will be back. You may have actually a classics special episode to put up with before James is back, depending on how Flanders goes. Some of us are heading to Flanders and Roubaix over the course of the next week or so. So I'm sure we'll have something for you from there.
Nice. All right, Ron. I'm going to ask you about Flanders Roubaix, but before I do, let's wrap up the news. There's 3 more items to discuss. Quick ones. So Wahoo have just added a firmware update to what I believe is just their newer computers, so more the color screen range of computers. But yeah, they've got more integration with training plans, so you can get your training plans synced directly to your device and follow them on the device. They've linked smart light controls for Ant Plus lights that you can power your settings through your computer and automate that. And they've also introduced a new one, which I hadn't seen before, GoPro control. So you can control your GoPro settings through your head unit.
I think these are good updates.
Good updates, free for existing users of newer Wahoo computers. And such firmware updates are rarely a bad thing. Yeah, anyway, I like where that's going. Specialized, they have the Phenom saddle, which is a long-standing mountain bike model, kind of the shape of what a power saddle was based off of, and it's a saddle I was incredibly loyal to until recent time, where I'm slowly switching over to the power where we're allowed, but I still have quite a few bikes with the Phenom. But they've finally brought the 3D printed technology to the Phenom, so there's now an SOX Phenom mirror saddle for mountain bikers or roadies that also agreed with me on saddle choice that want the mirror tech. So I was quite excited
for
to see
mountain
this.
bikers or roadies whose rear ends mirror yours.
All right. And then, last on the list of new things, CeramicSpeed OSPW, the oversized pulley wheel system. They've updated it for SRAM and Shimano. There's the new RS model. So, new visual look to it. But yeah, inside and outside, they've basically stiffened it. They've strengthened the cage. So, in theory, you should get even better shifting from it. And they've got their new ADR wheel, which was introduced first in the mountain bike side of things. Ronan, what does ADR stand for?
ADR stands for Active Debris Remover.
Wow. How does...
patent pending technical feature that is based on a unique combination that makes it virtually impossible for debris to enter the bearing.
There you go. So yeah, it's kind of geometry shaping on it that stops debris from going in, and it sort of pushes debris out as it spins.
Yeah, it's a new dust cover, isn't it?
Basically, yeah. But yeah, these are pretty good, and you can also get them with a solid wheel design in case you're worried about things finding themselves into the center of the wheel, or if you hate cleaning pulley wheels that have.
This is pulley wheel
cutouts.
you're talking about, not your actual wheel.
Correct. So sure,
Yeah.
yes,
Just-
the pulley
no,
wheel
just to
associated
clarify,
with the OSPW. Yes. But yeah, otherwise, looks like a nice product for those seeking
I think that's
the
the
1
main
or
thing.
2
Is that,
extra watt.
I think that's the main thing, is that the aesthetics of it are brought in line with sort of modern group sets.
Yeah.
The previous OSPW was very curvy, and this is much more angular, isn't it?
Yeah. Yep. I think that's a fair assessment. And yeah, would look a lot nicer with current Di2 and even SRAM derailleurs. So, yeah, I mean, OSPWs always have positive and negatives. The biggest negative is the price. But also, while the shifting isn't that terrible, there is traditionally a trade-off in shift quality by going to an OSPW. It just doesn't shift as nicely as SRAM or Shimano's own pulley cage, and that shouldn't be a huge surprise. But yeah, I mean, making it stiffer and making it stronger is only going to help reduce that gap and that trade-off. So yeah, for me, this product's... A lot of people see this product as a pure gimmick. It's not. It does reduce chain articulation through a bigger wheel, and the bearings do spin more smoothly than stock pulley wheels from Shimano and SRAM. So there is some gain there. It's small, and the more your chain is optimized through waxing or through good choice of chain lube or just keeping it clean, the benefits are reduced. But even still, for those that have liberal budgets, you will still get 1 to 2 watts savings out of one of these. So I'm not completely opposed to these things.
It's funny you said trade-offs and you went to price and shifting. In my head, I'd gone to like
Aero?
drivetrain efficiency, gain, aero loss. So just, yeah, there are other, not as pros and cons the right way to put it, but yeah. They have got the aero one now, obviously, as well. Don't know what difference that makes. I haven't tested is what I mean. But
so with what you know of it, Ronan, if you were building a dream race bike, road race bike, price no object, no sponsor limitations, would you run an OSPW?
I, again, having not done aero testing of my own on it, and presumably it would be very, very difficult to aero test it, I would run the OSPW aero.
Okay.
And it might be somewhat course specific also. Like when I was doing the Everesting, it was just a no-brainer because the aero wasn't going to be a huge issue there. Whereas in that scenario, I say that knowing that I'd focused quite a bit on aero for that, but setting that aside, but what I was going to say was that the actual drivetrain efficiency was going to be huge for 76 5-minute laps at 50 RPM and 300 odd watts. So that for that, it was just an absolute no-brainer. For something like a time trial, it's it's a bit more debatable. And with the aero one, it probably, if that is aero, it probably swings it a bit closer to yes, I would.
Hard one to measure
for a palm flat race in that scenario.
Sure. Okay. Hard one to measure.
I mean, when I've built the optimized bikes that I've done, I've typically included them. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, there you go. Well, that's the news for this week. That's the episode. Ronan, what are you up to for the next couple of weeks?
I'm going to my home away from home, Belgium. My happy place.
There's something going on there. What's happening?
There's a couple of big bike races next Sunday, and then there's a couple of big bike races over the weekend after that. Tour of Flanders and Paris-Roubaix.
Yeah, right. Okay. Yep.
We've also
not small races.
Got quite a considerable chunk of the Escape Collective staff team descending on Belgium for an official get together for planning and all sorts of good work stuff that we're going to be doing together. And we have a member summit, which if you're only hearing about this now, or if you've heard about this before and didn't sign up, it's too late. But we have a team of members descending on Belgium also to do some bike riding with us, and some bike riding with Johan Museu, and some bike riding on the Paris-Roubaix Challenge Sportif course. So it's going to be a big 10 days.
Sounds quite excellent. As far as tech content goes, I assume you're planning something.
Yeah, we'll have the usual Paris-Roubaix, Tour of Flanders tech galleries. I mean, you never know what you're going to see there until you're there. So that's all. There's always something interesting. No doubt to be something else along that. I think we'll have a Geek Warning episode from the classics.
Great.
Potentially with Zach Edwards joining us again. I know he's in Ghent. Also.
Yes. Traveling with Ruth at the moment.
Yes. She's racing Dwars Tour of Flanders tomorrow, so I assume she's doing Tour of Flanders at the weekend. Not sure what her plans are for Paris-Roubaix. And then, who knows what else will pop up. Hopefully a few more podcast recordings, get those in the bank and have them ready to roll out over April and May. Okay.
Well, yeah, I guess to show how professional we are, we have no set plans as for what the podcast schedule looks like over the next 2 weeks. So
that was just my long-winded way of saying, no, I have no plan for
good.
For the classic.
Good. But there'll definitely be podcasts coming from Roubaix. Whether that'll replace the weekly show, you'll find out when we do. So...
Shortly afterwards, we'll record first and then publish.
Yeah, we'll know first, but you'll learn at the time of publishing. But either way, come back next week. There will be more content. And I guess thank you to all the members that allow our content to exist. You are really the sole reason for us being able to do what we do. So thank you. And for anyone that hasn't yet joined in supporting, please consider doing so, because we still don't have as many members as we'd like to have in order to do the content we'd like to do. So that's the pitch.
I have a message for Joan and a message for Paul.
Oh, okay.
You've been listening for a while now without being a member. It's time to sign up.
Joan and Paul. All right. Thank you, Ronan. It's good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Enjoy the land of Belgium and the Frites.
Yeah, it's a shame you can't join us, but you did have a long trip to Europe recently, so couldn't expect someone to do that twice.
Sure. You could, but it just wasn't going to happen. So.
Wouldn't make sense.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much, and see you soon.